Hey y'all, it's your boy Nico. Don't worry, I am focusing on the road as I'm making this video. So, Spirit is calling me online to talk to you guys about something that many of you have been following me, or if you know of me or know about me, as I am Healer Nico. I deal with the gray area of relationships. And what does that entail? The gray area of relationships isn't always quote-unquote black or white, in how people will have a fixed mindset on how relationships should and should not work. Now, in the last couple of years, and a disclaimer here, that I've been picking up more on these social cues and social paradigms when it comes to relationships between quote-unquote celebrities or public figures or well-known artists versus their fans or those who support them, etc., etc. Like how I have a following, probably nowhere in comparison compared to other individuals that we know about or know of. Not necessarily know intimately, but know thereof and have much unconditional love for. So I, in the last couple of years, have been picked up upon these boundaries. And a lot of individuals who use that term boundaries always think of boundaries as a physical wall or like a physical barrier between you and the other side, your room versus the other person's room. And that's not the case. Relationships make it out to be whatever you make relationships out to be. Especially when it comes to these quote-unquote healthy versus quote-unquote unhealthy paradigms of said relationship. And the term that has closely come up to my attention quite a lot, actually, is within the last month, is Parasocialism. Now, to my beginning understanding of this term and how this blanket of a term has been utilized between public figures and their fans and those who closely consider themselves, somebody's top fan or resonate out with these individuals or like familiar souls. And while trying to keep this very English-based for you guys so you guys can understand, I'm trying not to switch to spiritual terminology here for some of you who don't understand spiritual lingo when it comes to like twin flames or kindred souls and stuff like that. While there's individuals like myself who closely resonate out with familiar souls, who we jive and we vibe and we have great times, really, really, really great times with each other and sharing the same space, not with each other, but sharing the same space among each other, right? If it's at certain clubs or events or, social gatherings, and even BTS, like behind the scenes, like the masses don't need to know what kind of, this is a stretch of a terminology here, but I'm paraphrasing when I say this. Society doesn't need to know what color underwear that you're wearing, right? Whatever happens behind the scenes between two consenting adults, and when you start taking labels and titles and hierarchy of society out of the context of socialism and then put it into a para-socialism point of view, and this leans more to the leftists than the rightists do, the liberals versus the conservative mindset and everything else like that. Again, I'm not bringing politics into this, but you see a lot of this quote-unquote parasocialism happening on the liberal spectrum or the liberal aspect or the blue side of things. Republic versus democratical. And me, politically speaking, I'm an independent. I'm for the people. I've always been for the people, and I'm always going to be with the people. The power is with the people. But that doesn't mean undermine your government and bite the hand that feeds you at the same time. I do hold a lot of conservative values. I was raised in both a liberal and conservative household between the Democratic and Republican parties. Mom being the Democratic Party, and then my not adopted father, but my stepfather, who raised me since I was 9 as the conservative Republican. So, being raised in a split home, so you guys can further understand from my personal point of view of things and how I personally operate in my relationships, where a lot of these relationships are taboo, and according to a lot of individuals who confront me or sent me hate DMs or sent me messages in the regard of my quote-unquote parasocialistic happenings that I partake in. And parasocialism is all about a one-sided, unreciprocated fan having a huge infatuated crush on a celebrity figure, a public figure, etc., etc. So, first of all, another disclaimer, how I see from a spiritual point of view versus the socialist or realists or whatever type of point of view that you're living in or believing in or having faith or hope by that continues to allow you to survive and breathe another day. My very hope and faith in this world, and I've been a spiritualist since 2018, okay? Since 2018, my quote-unquote spiritual awakening arrived, not just because I fell head over heels for a woman or, believing in love at first sight, okay? And having this very Romeo and Juliet, this very Titanic, very it doesn't matter what class you're from or what neighborhood you reside in. Why can't we just all get together and say, we're one big happy family? If you guys know that quote alone, that's from the movie Malibu's Most Wanted. Okay? So there's a lot of things that you guys will hear me relate to when it comes to artistry, creativity, Hollywood, cinema, music, anything that has to do with self-expression. I was raised in a Jim Carrey household. If you guys don't know who Jim Carrey is, you must be living in another world or a different universe altogether, because everyone and their grandparents know who Jim Carrey is. And himself is also known to be weird or diluted or whatever labels and titles that society puts upon other people. This is the very point that I'm trying to get at, is people are going to control the paradigm, and people are always going to try to control the outlook of your relationship with somebody else, because whether if it intrudes on other people's boundaries, and again, boundaries are having a clear, concise trust and respect between you and the other person, and a clear, concise understanding about the shoulds and shouldn'ts within said adult relationships, okay? And whenever we get dumbfounded or pulled into... Sorry, there's an accident on the road, so I'm trying to avoid that. Someone's tire popped. Excuse me for a second. Whenever you get sucked into this duping pattern of living by someone else's standards other than your own point of view on how you personally operate within relationships, and keep in mind, everyone isn't raised the same. Some people might be raised in money. Other people might be raised in, what is this guy doing? Why is he stopping like that? Okay. Other people might be, raised in poverty. So it's just a matter of respecting each other's position and point of view on life and everything else like that. However, I hold myself accountable when it comes to these kind of things through certain thoughts, emotions, and actions. Who puts a four-way stop on a highway? Anyways, Alabama's weird. whenever we get to falling into these duping patterns of trying to live by other people's standards or societal beliefs and what's societally acceptable, and whatever may or may not hinder on someone's individual growth or mental health or physical well-being or emotional well-being, spiritual well-being. I also had a bumpy road about how I navigate certain relationships, even as a healer. It doesn't make me indestructible from these certain trauma patterns, because I've been through trauma. Being a soul living this human experience, I've been through my own personal trauma as well when it comes to unrequited love or the reasons why people aren't ready to be in any type of committed relationship, even if it's a one-sided feeling. I've been approached by individuals who found me utterly attractive and who have fallen in love with me that myself and I have not necessarily reciprocated that emotion to them. And I went out of my way in order to tell them and communicate with them and verbalize, hey, respectfully, I'm flattered that you feel this way for me. And communication is key, right? I mean, there's certain individuals out there who might have avoidant attachment styles or anxiety disorders to an extreme level where it's affecting them on a physical level. And the very point that I'm getting at is understanding your own level of mental awareness may not jive or be on the same level of their mental awareness, and vice versa. So, however, if you are somebody who eventually found an awakening, and somebody like myself who has greatly resonated with a higher power, that there is a God, that you're in alignment with certain pathways in life that are calling you out to a greater calling, and then when you get connected with these quote-unquote parasocial relationships, according to society's terminology on this, that you can appreciate someone's creativity, you can arrive to somebody to a certain extent, but they voice out their clear and concise boundaries about what lines not to cross within said relationship, and understand, and if they told you multiple times that they're not into you, but not in a direct communicated way, but maybe they utilized it through a third party and, indirectly communicated with you because they don't completely feel comfortable with said individual, i.e. the, celebrity to the fan trying to communicate to the individual who has this quote-unquote parasocial connection with, and they gaslit them and they led you on to believe that all the signs, all the signals and everything else was there in all areas. I'm saying this in general. I'm not trying to get all into the nitty-gritty and the very detailed context of everything, but my own situations, my own relationships are going to be completely different than someone else's relationships. And outside the context of said relationship between person A and person B, when you start getting other factors and other people involved in said A and B relationship, it can get very messy and can get very lost in sauce, energetically speaking. And I understand it, and using myself as an example, I have indeed been through a parasocial, let me just use that terminology so other people can understand from their own skewed point of view, but in my eyes, that wasn't a parasocial happening. In my eyes, that was actually real emotions occurring, that was real feelings, that was real humanness coming out of me and out of the other person. And as much as they agree or deny with all the connectivities at the time, is on them, right? So I'm not here to prove that otherwise. I'm here to put a voice on something that I feel like I've been personally silenced or even damn near canceled upon, is because I had, or still have, quite actually and honestly and earnestly, if I'm being truthful with myself, that I still have very strong and wrong emotions toward the said individual, and even individuals over time, okay? not just with one individual, but there's a clear, concise pattern within inside myself that does obviously exist, and it wouldn't be the first quote-unquote public figure that I fell in love with. But at the same time, without labels and without titles, we're all human. We all bleed the same. We all come into this life the same way. We all leave this life the same way. Okay? Not the same way, but we all are born, we all live, and we all die just the same. That's what I mean. Not to mean to say that we all die the same way. That's not what I meant. But you guys are catching what I'm throwing, right? So status, labels, titles, and money, or your level of class, shouldn't define who we are as individuals. But the world, the very 3D world that we live in, it does. It quite clearly does define where life places us in a social dynamic. And if you take Titanic, which is a great example of Rose being in this upper class, even though the outlooks aren't looking so great for Rose and her family, and including her mom, and that very plot alone, they don't have any money. But the outlook, they are holding a name that is holding a rich name, right? Because their lineage came from money, old money. And just because you have an association with a name automatically categorizes you in such stature and such placement within society. Now that I got all that sub-detail and sub-context out of the way, in the world point of view, in the world's eyes, just because you have labels and titles or a crown to be a king or a queen doesn't necessarily mean that you have all the benefits and traits to that crown, if you will, that placement within society. There are many artists that I personally...
In half a mile, keep left to continue on US 45 alternate north.
Sorry about that. That I personally know that look like they're rich, but they're not really rich. Being's reasons why they go upon life the way that they're going.
Keep left to continue on US 45 alternate north.
Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Thanks, GPS. That people are placed upon in these certain classes, if you will, and money doesn't define these individuals. Money doesn't even define me. However, the very 3D matrix reality that we live in does define our tax bracket, does define our class, does define whether for upper, middle, or lower class. I was born and raised in a lower economy, in Section 8 housing, and where I was raised without a father, therefore, which forced my mother to raise children on her own while trying to work and put us through school and daycare and whatnot, all on her own. So, with all that said and done, it does matter, but it doesn't matter to a certain extent and about placement, where you are within the economy and the type of work that you're putting in and providing to the world and the world before you, and how the world is benefiting from the very work that you're instilling within said environment, said world, or whoever connects with your work, or even if they don't connect with your work directly, indirectly, how are we providing a service so then everybody can benefit from said creative processes? So I'm not even trying to dive into my own personal stuff while I'm just trying to keep this on parasocial topic, but to understand someone like myself who has survived, I will say that I survived a parasocial one-sided relationship, even though that from my point of view and from her point of view, the feelings and emotions were very, very real, and a lot of things were being mused, M-U-S-E-D, mused in the process of creativity. And I say this very lightly when I say that in a certain way, I knew that things were going to go down the way they were going down. in said quote-unquote parasocial relationship, I knew what was going to come down the road by understanding the risks and versus the benefits, the pros and cons of said relationship. And I still leaned into said relationship, knowing the benefits versus the consequences of being in said relationship, okay? I knew the consequences from the get-go. I knew it. And it wasn't just because I'm paying the creator because I love their content or because I resonate closely with the work, but I also personally resonated on a spiritual and soulful level with them as an individual outside their work, outside their job, and everything else like that. But other people didn't see it that way. So therefore, one thing came to another, and eventually people grew uncomfortable about me being around the group or whatever the case might be. And so the voices were being heard about how my personal feelings and my own personal emotions were probably overshadowing this group's vibes or energies overall, and that wasn't meant to be an overshadow in the first place or even to grow to a negative spiral in the first place. And while this person that I'm referring to didn't directly come to me and communicate with me saying that they did not feel for me at all or whatsoever the case might be, they never came to me and said that they didn't feel for me. In retrospect, they kept proving to me from time and time and time again that they did have feelings and emotions for me. But there was a huge difference between being public about it and being private about it. So I think I missed the social cue in that very fact, and I'm speaking from my own personal point of view on this, and being outside, like away from this relationship, not by choice but by force, really. And in a way, I felt exiled from the group because of my real and true and authentic emotions about this individual. So it still hurts me to this day, the very fact that I felt used, not just financially. I felt abused emotionally and taken advantage of from a societal standpoint, but personally, if I can, speak on a personal takeaway here about how I wanted to feel, all I wanted out of this relationship was reciprocation, which I felt like and knew that I was getting, not in a direct manner, but in an indirect way. So again, there's a directness versus indirectness, because this person in context is an indirect attacher, like avoidant attacher, and how they personally operate within their said intimate or inner circle relationships, okay? With me, I'm a very secure attacher, and I'm very sure of myself, and when I know something, when I speak on something, when I act upon something, and when I surely, without a shadow of doubt in my mind, know for a fact that I'm in love, I know I'm in love. So the very whole gaslight that I was talking to you guys about earlier and touching upon was the very fact and the acknowledgement of said emotions, and also the denial of same or similar emotions in that regard. So a lot of individuals, especially when you're dealing with like music, utilize different formulas and strategies on how to keep a following and everything else like this. How to keep your followers engaged and how to keep the fan base, keep investing in their products and everything else like that. I get it. It is your lifestyle. Whoever is finding this video, it is very much so a real survival mechanism, and it is your daily life. That is who you are. Just like how I have a daily job and how certain things I should and shouldn't do, right? And those certain laws and guidelines and everything else like that. But let me just say this, and I don't feel like I want to make this any longer. I don't feel like my relationship with this said individual was parasocial at all. It was very behind the scenes, very real, raw, true, and authentic. And if it was as real as I describe it out to be, was there ever moments and periods in time where I actually had a physical interaction or like outside the club, outside the events, outside of the job or business mindset or orientation in that regard. Yes, there has been several occurrences where I had a personal relationship, not physical and not intimate. Well, even though it felt intimate, there was no romance, if that makes, there's no physical romance. That's just a politer way of saying that, right? However, intimacy does not mean sex, right? Intimacy is, to me, I see in a spiritual context, when you love someone, you're taking them as a part of you, and hopefully them loving you, and in reciprocal, they take you as a part of them. That's what it means to be in love. As soon as I take you as a part of me, I love you literally means I take you as a part of me. And intimacy is a part of that. Intimacy is like the sole factor of what it means to be in love with somebody. And it doesn't just mean physically, right? We just clarified that. So, even though my heart and my soul and my body, my mind, my emotions, and the whole autonomy of that is Nico, that is me, I knew that relationship was very real. And it's like, why would it even matter to anyone else if I let anybody know about this said relationship? And why does it mean so much to me for the world to know about such quote-unquote parasocial relationship? Well, love isn't hidden. Love does not hide. Love is not ashamed. Love is not afraid of X, Y, or Z. Okay? And even though I had a connection with this quote-unquote parasocial relationship, even though it wasn't, because of the reluctant communication, or even if there was communication, there was a ton of miscommunication or misunderstanding from my part, or even her part, that a certain blockade and certain wall was put up by society, which put a strain on our relationship, which forced me to veer to the next person closest to her. Okay? And why am I coming out and speaking about this? Because it is also a part of my healing journey in order for me to live, love, and learn, and eventually let go. Because not everyone that we meet or bump into or fall in love with or get all head over heels about is going to love us back. And that is the harsh reality of relationships. And whenever we start putting labels and titles upon these relationships and have a fixed boundary or fixed mindset on said quote-unquote parasocial relationships, a relationship between a celebrity and a fan, and even though that you might be associated with such paradigms of said relationships, that society loves to control the outcome of what they prefer, what relationships they deem necessary, and other relationships they totally want to avoid, what the public eye wants to avoid from, right? So the masses vote, and if the masses say that you and her will not be in a relationship, then the vote stands. That now becomes factual. That becomes reality, because society deems it to be so, deems it to be gospel, deems it to be truth, and it's not. People cannot control, and that was one of the messages that I had to learn within the last couple of years of being in this type of paradigm of a relationship. Take it with a grain of salt, however, resonated out with you personally. But with me, it varied. It mattered a whole lot some. Even though I've done so much crying, I've done so much crashing out, I've done so much finding myself throughout that kind of relationship, to clearly, concise, to understand that money isn't and shouldn't be the driving factor of a relationship. And it wasn't for me. I don't know how it felt for her, but to a certain extent I do. But from a societal standpoint, I do not understand why people felt like it was necessary to put up certain walls and boundaries and everything else like that, despite the very paradigms
In
of
2 miles, take the
certain
Mississippi 182 exit toward East Mississippi Community College, Golden Triangle campus.
paradigms of certain relationships. So I'm about to head out on this exit. I'm reaching my destination point. Thank you for listening out to this video. If you're finding this video, if it resonates with you, please make sure you drop a like or a follow. If you find this on YouTube or Insta or wherever you might find this video, just know society needs to stop judging people in their intimate relationships. And maybe it was my ultimate downfall for making it public knowledge. And if the quote-unquote wrong people found out that it was either one of the policies or laws of this quote-unquote parasocial dynamic, one of the stipulations from what I heard from society is that celebrities or public figures of their stance are like not allowed to date fans. Like, it can vary.
In half a mile, take the Mississippi 182 exit toward East Mississippi Community College, Golden Triangle campus.
It can get misconstrued, lost in sauce, can get very messy. And sure enough, there was damage control that occurred. So even though a lot of my emotions
Take the Mississippi 182 exit.
Even though a lot of my emotions were affected greatly, and nothing.
In a quarter mile, turn left onto Mississippi 182 west.
Nothing that I personally let it affect me to the detriment point where I lost my total amount of sanity, if that makes any sense. And
turn left onto Mississippi 182 west.
I'm not here to defend myself. I'm not here to apologize because my emotions were very real and they still are. So I just think it's one of those bag of bricks that I'm going to have to let go and lay down and learn from, actually, and to heal. Not to heal from, but to integrate with and heal along beside, because it is me that we're talking about in this context. And to understand, to give people space when they ask for space. And even though I may no longer follow or interact or subscribe to certain content, is because not only because I wasn't blacklisted, I wasn't exiled or anything else like that, okay, so far as my knowledge goes, but it's like I'm not in the wrong for feeling what I was feeling. I'm not in the wrong for acting upon said emotions, and I don't regret it. I have zero regrets. I have no regrets. And to look back on it and to keep bringing it up is because it's still a part of my healing process and healing journey. Is the reason why I'm still bringing it up. It's because I still have love for this individuals. So, and how confusing it was to go through the process alone, let alone through 2 divorces back then, dating back to 2014, 2015, 2018 time frame, are a lot of big years for a lot of society and a lot of different individuals who were ever around or associated with me. But if you know, you know. And it sucks that I have to part ways and be like, I can no longer interact with the individuals in context, and that part alone hurts me the most. Is to know that I have such deep, immense love and genuine care for this individual, and I keep trying to say plural is because I see myself as a part of her. That's why I keep saying the S, like plural, is because we're 2 different people, even though we're sharing the same consciousness. It's just when society hasn't gone through the Great Awakening to understand that we're all one vast universe, we're all one energetic entity. If you think about it like as an octopus head with like octopus arms or legs, that we're all a part of the same symbiotic osmosis of everything. So that's all I really got to say about parasocial relationships. I don't subscribe and don't agree to this terminology, and how greatly, and I will say one more thing before I go, and how greatly it can negatively affect the fan. And not just the fan, but also the label and title in question. But labels and titles shouldn't be so set in stone, as if like a brick wall or cement wall is set between Israel and Palestine. You know what I mean? And even though that's a holy war that's been going on for centuries, the people are still divided on whether or not if celebrity and fan relationships are taboo or not. And in my eyes, they're not, because we're all just people. We all bleed the same. And the very fact that we have security keeping the masses away from celebrities makes sense, but at the same time, I don't subscribe to that either, because I used to work private sex security, and even though working as private security at one point, even underneath celebrities, that I can greatly understand why there's security there in the first place, but at the same time, but if you're genuine and have genuine, real relationships with these individuals, and they're not fantasy and they're not made up or infatuated, that these relationships actually do exist, and we shouldn't pretend that they don't. And I'm sick and tired of the masses in society and people labeling as such paradigm relationships to be parasocial and unreciprocated automatically, like as a blanket statement, as if like the fan is the bad person for even like acting upon their own raw and true and authentic emotions, and how much of a negative effect that it leaves the fan or the follower, if you will, or the lover on others, you know, on the other spectrum of it. And I understand that word lover makes a lot of people feel uncomfortable because it's like, it's not real. They already have a fixed mindset that it's not real. So, of course, it's going to make people feel uncomfortable. But what about how I feel and how I felt going through the process? I understand to a certain extent on how she might have felt going through the process at the same time, even though for a moment period in time there was emotions and feelings there, or discovery, or even love at that fact. And I'm just saying, you know, the devil's in the details, okay? Through the creative processes, the writings, the production, the delivery, the messages that are being said, the devil's in the details. So that's all I really got to say about that. And I hope you guys do understand that I'm not making this video for any attention, but just clarity, even if it's just for myself. So sending so much love and light to you guys. And I hope you guys have a great one. A happy 2026. And Happy New Year to anyone who is finding this video towards the end of February. And don't give up on love just because society deems it to be taboo. Okay? See you guys.